GK. Welcome to Whistle Talks. Thank you so much for joining me.
Kayla, it's been a pleasure. I'm excited about what we're going to discuss. Yeah.
So, before we talk about how vendors can align to win strategic accounts, could you please give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself and your history in the industry of B2B, GTM?
For the past 15 years or so, I've been specializing in all things related to winning customers. I played different roles around customer acquisition, whether it is in the sales, business development, marketing, and some strategic roles in terms of go to market as well. These roles have taught me something very valuable, very insightful on what it takes to win new customers, especially the strategic customers who may be multi-billion dollar. As you can imagine, they get targeted all the time. So how do you then differentiate from the rest of the competitors who are after those accounts? So that's been my passion. That's been an area that I've dealt deeply. And then I came out with some strategies, some tactics that have repeatedly proven to work. That's the bit of a background as to why I'm passionate about the area that I'm specialized in.
When did you start Winsights?
It's been more than 7 years now.
How can vendors position themselves as partners as opposed to just another vendor?
I think vendors are very much interested to sell what they've got to sell, right? Obviously, for good reasons, they're very keen about sharing everything that they've got, how it is going to change the world of the customer. The reality is far from the truth because
Yeah.
every other vendor pretty much does the same. I think the idea here is, especially in a commoditized technology services or commoditized products as well, like maybe a CRM, it's very hard to differentiate in a meaningful, measurable way to your clients. I think one of the proven ways you could do so is even though you may be offering a fairly non disruptive, fairly regular service, your ability to deep dive into who your customer is and what business environment do they operate and what are their strategic priorities and where do they want to take their company in next 3 5 years. If you're able to grasp those key aspects of your customer's business, that gives you enough and more insight in helping you align to those specific strategic priorities. And then you position yourself as a vendor who can help impact a particular strategic priority as opposed to all of them. So that's how you position yourself because your competition most likely doesn't.
When reaching out to these companies, the type of messaging and language that we use is very important and has to be altered or personalized. How can this language be altered from just a transactional language to a transformational language?
Let's say you have an RFP or a request for proposal, yeah, or request for quotation or request for information. What customer is essentially saying is they have a specific need, a specific requirement, and that need or requirement is spelled out in greater detail in terms of request for proposal document. Yeah, let's say you're part of the empanel vendor or they're floating it to open market. So everybody jumps on, okay, how do I address this requirement from a functional point of view, technical point of view, commercial point of view, right? That's
Yeah.
pretty much every vendor does. But what if I not only address the functional, technical, commercial aspect of that requirement, but also elevate my positioning by deep diving into, let's say, strategic priorities of your customers 5 years, 10 years from now. And honestly, you may not be able to impact all of them, but pick one that significantly aligns to your core capability as a company, and then say, this is how I'm able to address your requirement for this particular RFP. And this is how this is going to align with one of your strategic priorities, which you have set out to accomplish. When you take this conversation from transactional, which is your RFP requirement, to transformational, which is tying yourself to a strategic priority, you're obviously elevating the conversation as well as you're elevating your own positioning from vendor to partner, from transactional to transformational. That's what I mean by how you can do so as a vendor.
How can these vendors gain a mind share as a precursor to winning a wallet share?
If you map the organization and you also look at the key stakeholders, right? Yes, there are strategic priorities the organization has, but when you go down to a department level, so you look at different departments of the same business and you go, okay, this particular strategic priority aligns well with this department. For example, a chief operating officer or a chief financial officer might say lowering the cost of running business by 10 years over 3 years is our strategic priority, right? As a vendor, you have the proven solutions to help a CFO or a COO accomplish that. I will map the key stakeholders within the COO organization of that particular business, and then I start initiating those messages, the value proposition, or the contextualization of what they want to accomplish by sending those key targeted messages to different mapped buyer stakeholders within the COO organization. That clearly shows that, hey, you have done a ton of homework on that business, you have done a ton of homework on that particular COO function, and every message that is going from an organization, from marketing to inside sales to account executives, are only addressing that strategic priority and how you can help them save 10% of running the business over 3 years, right? How you can meaningfully, measurably contribute. So when you continuously do that, then you're actually gaining the mind share, right? Because everybody pictures the cookie cutter stuff. Nobody
Yeah.
talks in the context, right? And nobody actually correlates to the strategic priority with what you do. And when you are that specific, and that I have repeatedly seen attracts the attention of your buyer stakeholders. And as a result, that's what I mean by gaining the mind share, because attracting attention is the greatest currency out there because of so many distractions that your buyer is exposed to, right? And when you continuously do so, gaining mind share, that is a pathway to gaining the wallet share.
And these vendors, how are they able to map these stakeholders
Yeah.
to contribute to their KPIs?
You must understand that we are all driven by what is in it for me, right?
Yeah.
Well, organization is benefiting, my COO, CFO function is benefiting, but as an individual who is playing a certain role, how is it going to look me good in front of my management, right? So, because then ultimately that particular individual or that particular professional is measured by the KPIs and metrics defined by the organization. Now, if the solution can not only address the organizational level at a functional level, but also at an individual role level, you are able to positively impact, then that particular individual has a personal incentive to bat for you or to watch for you or even to champion your proposition within the organization, right? Because you are helping them look good in terms of the management and you're helping them achieve their own KPIs and metrics. Every seller out there, if they can really align at organizational, functional, and individual level to the extent that practically you can, you really have a secret sauce out there.
GK, is there anything else that you'd like to speak about in terms of how vendors can align to win these accounts?
I think the other interesting thing that hardly spoken about, it is surprising how much it is overlooked. As an example, you know, top leadership talks a lot about culture. They talk a lot about vision, mission, values, right? If you go to a multi-billion dollar company, senior management would love to talk about the culture, the leadership, the vision, mission, CSR initiatives. As a vendor, you wouldn't bother about looking any of those aspects of the customer business, right? You're only looking at whatever I outlined, which is absolutely critical. But how about looking at the DNA of the organization, of your customer? And then it may be likely that there are certain cultural aspects of your organization that are relatable to that of your customers. So when you're able to relate your values or maybe your culture with that of your target customer, then suddenly you're actually taking the conversation to a whole different level. In almost all my conversations, I've never seen any vendor talk about customers' culture, talk about customers' values. And this is an opportunity for you as a vendor to touch upon that, because that's very emotional and that's very valuable to your customer. And if
Yeah.
you're able to sort of tell a story and create a resonance there, you're already having those emotional connects with your buyer. One live example, in the past company that I was part of, we had one CSR initiative, which is
Mhm.
Million Meals Program. As an
Yes.
organization, my ex-employer was committed to sponsor million meals in India. When we approached a client and we were talking about all things business, and we happened to have told the customer that as part of the CSR initiative, we have this Million Meals program as a midday meal to school children in semi-urban rural India. And that one statement got the customer so interested, so excited. He said, how can I contribute to that Millions Meals program? It is that emotional connect, right? Those are the softer aspects that you need to strike an emotional chord with in a very authentic, genuine way, not to score some brownie points with the customer. That's not the intent. In a very authentic, genuine way, when you do so, and it really, really works in most cases. So that's just one of the examples.
How did that initiative go? Was it successful?
We were shortlisted on the back of course, our strength in terms of as a company, as a profile, as credibility, credentials. We were shortlisted to bid for the request for proposal that they floated. I can't remember whether we won it or we lost it, but at least it got us thus far. And the align to win as a strategy or an account intel, which we call it as win book, is essentially I've got few scenarios. One, I said RFP, where you're invited to bid for a request for proposal. But what if there is another scenario where you have strategic meeting with senior customer stakeholders and you are going and presenting your company profile to be shortlisted as a vendor or to be empaneled as a vendor? If you go and just tell the same boring story, they're not going to buy from you. But the fact that you are able to deep dive into that account and position yourself as a partner, then they see you as someone who's a long term player who's committed to be part of the journey, rather than having an opportunistic approach. Yeah. As an organization, if you have a stated intent to go after, let's say, 20 strategic accounts in 2025, which are $1 to $5 billion, just as an example, what kind of strategy you will apply to acquire as many of those strategies accounts as you can? So the account intel or a win book is one of the critical elements to your success or failure of acquiring those strategic accounts. So these are the three different scenarios we have seen to effectively use the win book or account intel to their advantage.
I love the use of Winbook.
I mean, the idea is, the whole industry calls it playbook, but you don't play just for the sake of it, right? You're playing because you want to win, right?
To
So
win.
why don't you shift your mindset from playing to winning, right? So that's why win book.
Thank you so much, GK, for joining Whistle Talks. It was so lovely to hear your expertise.
Kyla, it's been a pleasure, and thank you for having me with Whistle. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I do hope that your audience will enjoy this conversation and have some takeaways that they can implement in their business.